Chapter 6 explores prescriptive purpose delivered through mission, objectives and ethics. In order to develop the mission and objectives of an organisation, we need to stand back and consider why the organisation exists, who it's meant to serve, and how its value is added and distributed amongst the stakeholders. There are three related areas to this: an organisation's vision of the future, number one; stakeholder power, number two; and governance, ethics and corporate social responsibility, number three. All these will then lead on to defining and describing an organisation's mission and objectives. Fundamental to the exploration of purpose is the definition of the organisation's activities. It needs to be narrow enough to be actionable and broad enough to allow scope for further development. It will develop from a consideration of the organisation's customers and also from its own competitive resources. Within these broad considerations, there are then three further issues, the first of them being to develop a strategic vision of the future. Vision is defined as being a challenging and imaginative picture of the future role and objectives of an organisation, significantly going beyond its current environment and competitive position. There are 5 criteria that may assist in developing the organisation's vision. Number 1, foresight. Number 2, breadth. Number 2, uniqueness. Number 4, consensus. And number 5, actionability. The second of the 3 areas that will particularly influence purpose is stakeholder power. Stakeholders are the individuals and groups who have an interest in the organisation and therefore may wish to influence aspects of its mission, objectives and strategies. Stakeholders will cover shareholders, but also others such as employees, managers, the government may have an interest, suppliers and customers may have an interest. The problem is that stakeholder interests may conflict. Consequently, the organisation will need to resolve which stakeholders have priority, and stakeholder power therefore needs to be analysed. Where conflict exists, negotiations are undertaken to reach a compromise, and sanctions may form part of this process. The next area that will influence purpose is corporate governance. Corporate governance refers to the influence and power of the stakeholders to control the strategic direction of the organisation in general, especially the authority of the chief executive and other senior officers of the organisation. This has become a real issue over the last few years as there has been some conflict in this area. It relates primarily to the selection, remuneration and conduct of the senior officers in the organisation. It's also concerned with their relationship with owners, employees and other stakeholders. Effectively, the senior officers act as agents on behalf of the other stakeholders. A related but different area is that of ethics and corporate social responsibility. By ethics and corporate social responsibility is meant the standards and conduct that an organisation sets itself in its dealings with the organisation and outside with the environment. There are 3 prime considerations in developing ethics and social responsibility. Number 1, the extent and scope of such considerations. 2, their cost. And 3, the recipient of the responsibility. There are numerous differences between organisations over what should be covered under ethics and corporate social responsibility, reflecting fundamentally different approaches to doing business and therefore to the purpose of the organisation. This all now leads us to developing the mission of the organisation. The mission of an organisation outlines the broad general directions that should and will follow and briefly summarises the reasoning and values that lie behind them. Mission is different because it is a more specific statement of where companies are going in general terms. It's also different from objectives, which are then a more specific commitment consisting with the precise goals and development objectives over the next 2 or 3 years, very often in numerical terms, but not necessarily so. Mission and objectives are essentially prescriptive in their approach. Some emergent views doubt the usefulness of a mission and objectives because the future of organisations is so uncertain. Other emergent approaches accept the need for a mission and objectives, but place great emphasis on the need to include managers and employees in the development in a negotiated and therefore indistinct way. There are 5 elements in formulating a mission statement. Number 1, nature of the organisation. Number 2, customer perspective. Number 3, values and beliefs. Number 4, competitive advantage or distinctiveness. And number 5, the main reasons for the approach. Finally, we come to objectives. Objectives take the generalities of a mission statement and turn them into more specific commitments, as we previously explored. Different kinds of objectives are possible. Some will be quantified and some not. There may be some conflict between objectives, between especially the long and short-term interests of the organisation. Shareholding structures will also impact on objectives. UK and US companies are under greater pressure for short-term performance. Ultimately, objectives need to be challenging and achievable.